The market smelled of oil, sweat, and smoke. Cages stood in long lines, metal bars glowing under the dim red lights. Inside the cages were creatures from many worlds, some strong and proud, some broken and weak, all waiting for the hammer of the auctioneer. Among them was a young alien woman, her skin pale silver, her eyes large and filled with fear, her thin hands gripping the bars. She had been taken from her village months ago, sold from trader to trader, and now she was here, on the biggest slave market in this part of the galaxy. The auctioneer shouted loudly, his voice like thunder, calling for bids, while men and women in fine clothes laughed and pointed at the captives. Every sale was a show, every bid a cruel game. The alien woman could hear the jeers, the insults, the mocking laughter. To the crowd, she was not a person, only an object. A pleasure animal, as they called her kind. Her heart beat fast and her breath was sharp. She wanted to scream, but no sound came, only silence. The auctioneer struck his hammer against the wooden post. "Next one," he shouted, dragging her cage forward. The crowd pressed closer, eyes bright with hunger, some for money, some for lust. "Look at her," the auctioneer said, his grin wide and cruel. "Rare bloodline. Young, healthy, untouched, who will start the bidding?" Numbers flew from the crowd, coins and credits held high. The woman shut her eyes tight, wishing she could vanish into the air. Each bid was another chain on her body, another lock on her spirit. She had seen what happened to those sold before her. She knew what waited. She told herself not to cry, but a tear slid down her cheek anyway. The people laughed when they saw it, enjoying her shame. Then the crowd grew quiet. A figure stepped forward, slow and calm. It was a human man, middle-aged, with gray in his beard and tired eyes. His clothes were plain, not like the rich buyers around him, yet he stood with a strange strength. Some in the crowd whispered, "What is he doing here?" Others laughed, "He cannot pay the price." But the man raised his hand and called a number. Higher than all others. The auctioneer blinked, surprised, then smiled. "Sold," he shouted, striking the hammer. The cage opened with a loud creak, and rough hands pushed the alien woman toward her new owner. She stumbled, falling to her knees, waiting for the chain, waiting for the collar, waiting for the slap that always came, but nothing happened. The man bent down and gently helped her to her feet. His touch was soft, his voice low. "Stand. You are safe now." The crowd booed and hissed, angry at the dull ending, but the man ignored them. He led her away step by step through the noise of the market. Her mind raced, her heart confused. Why had this man bought her? What did he want? Why was he not cruel? She glanced at his face and saw no hunger, no wicked smile, only something heavy like sorrow. He did not drag her. He did not strike her. He simply walked with her. The road outside the market was dark, stars glowing above the city towers. For the first time in many months, she breathed without chains. Still fear clung to her, whispering, "It is a trick. He will hurt you later." At last they reached a small home at the edge of the district. It was not rich or large, but it was clean, quiet, and warm. Inside he gave her food, plain bread and water. More than she had eaten in days. She watched him closely, waiting for the demand, waiting for the order, but he only sat across from her, silent, letting her eat. Later he gave her clothes, soft and simple, not the torn rags from the cage. She held them in her hands, trembling. "Why?" she whispered, but he gave no answer, only a tired smile. When she could not stay awake any longer, he showed her a bed, not chains, not the floor, but a bed with blankets. She sat on it, still waiting for the cruelty to come. The man spoke at last, his voice steady. "No one will harm you here, not even me." She stared at him, not believing, not trusting, but a small spark lit in her heart. Perhaps he was different, perhaps he was not like the others. Outside the city roared with laughter, trade, and cruelty. But inside that quiet room something new began, something fragile and strange. The alien woman closed her eyes, still afraid, but for the first time with a drop of hope. And the man sat in the shadows watching over her, his thoughts heavy, his past hidden. The world believed he had bought a slave, a pleasure animal. But in his heart he had chosen something far more dangerous. He had chosen to treat her as his wife. The morning sun touched the city with pale light. The alien woman woke slowly, her eyes opening to a quiet room. For a moment she forgot where she was, and fear rushed back. But then she saw the blanket over her, the clean clothes on her body. And she remembered she was no longer in the cage, no longer at the market. Yet her heart whispered, "It cannot last." The man sat at a wooden table, sipping hot drink. His face was calm, lined with age, but there was no cruelty in his eyes. He looked at her and spoke softly. "You can eat, if you want." On the table was food again, more than she had seen in months. Her stomach ached with hunger, but her pride fought against it. She did not want to appear weak. Not in front of him still, her hands betrayed her. Reaching out, trembling, taking bread.
He said nothing, only nodded as if giving her permission to live.
In her world, men like him had no mercy. She had seen humans break families, take children, burn villages. Why was this one different? What game was he playing? Her eyes narrowed, watching him. Studying his every move, he did not chain her. He did not shout. Instead, he asked, "Do you have a name?" She froze, the question strange, almost painful. For so long, she had been called only by numbers or insults. Her true name had almost vanished from her memory. Slowly, she whispered it, her voice small. "Sira," the man repeated it carefully with respect. "Sira?" It sounded strange in his human tongue. But also safe. Days passed and nothing changed. The man, whose name was Daniel, gave her space. He worked during the day fixing machines, trading goods. Speaking little, he never forced her. Never touched her without reason. Sira waited for the mask to fall, for the monster to show, but it never came. Instead, she found silence, food, and safety, things more shocking than cruelty. Yet her mind remained restless. She asked herself again and again, "Why did he buy me?" The answer came one evening. When Daniel led her into the town, people stared at them, their faces full of laughter and disgust. "Look, the human brought his toy," one man sneered. Another woman spat on the ground. "Shameful. A beast in human clothes." Sira felt her skin burn with shame. Her eyes searching the ground, she wanted to run, to hide. But Daniel did not let go of her hand. He walked with calm steps, his head high. At last they reached a small gathering place, neighbors waiting, curious. Daniel stood in front of them and said clear words. "This is Sira, she is my wife." The crowd exploded in noise. Some laughed like mad. Others shouted curses. "No human marries an animal," a man roared. "She is property, nothing more," another cried. But Daniel did not move, his hand still holding hers firmly. His voice was steady, louder than the crowd. "She is my wife, not my slave, not my property. She is my choice." The words struck like fire in Sira's heart. She stared at him, not believing wife. He had called her wife in her people's language. That word was sacred. It meant bond, respect, equality. Her chest tightened, and she could not speak. The crowd grew angry. Some even violent. A stone flew. Hitting the wall near them, Daniel did not flinch. But Sira saw danger building. At last he pulled her back, leading her away. Behind them, the insults continued, echoing in the streets. But Daniel's grip on her hand was strong. Unshaken, when they reached home, he spoke gently. "I will never let them decide who you are, do you understand?" She stared at him, her eyes wet, not from pain, but from something new. It was not yet trust, not yet love, but a crack had opened in her heart. For the first time, she thought maybe, just maybe, he was not her enemy. That night she lay awake, turning his words again and again. Why would a man risk his place in the world, his honor, even his safety for her? He could have treated her as a servant. No one would question. He could have sold her again. No one would care. But instead he had declared her his wife. The word burned in her mind. Both frightening and beautiful if he spoke truth. Then her life was no longer chains. If he spoke truth, then she had a future. Outside the house, whispers spread. Some humans called Daniel a fool. Others called him a traitor. The authorities began to watch him, and Sira felt eyes on her everywhere she went. She knew danger was coming, but she also felt something she had never felt before. A spark of belonging, a seed of hope. Daniel sat by the window that night. Looking at the stars, his face was calm, but his thoughts were heavy. He knew the storm was near, he knew men would come, but he had chosen his path, and he would not turn back, for in Sira's eyes, he had seen what he thought was lost forever, the chance for a better world, and he would protect it no matter the cost. The city never stayed quiet, its streets alive with noise, trade, and secrets. But among those whispers, a new story spread. A human had bought an alien slave and called her his wife. People laughed in taverns, they cursed in markets, and they gossiped in homes. The tale grew like fire, twisting, changing, turning Daniel into a madman and Sira into a shame. Everywhere she walked, eyes followed her. Children pointed and shouted, women pulled them close, warning, "Stay away." Men smirked and whispered dirty jokes as she passed. She lowered her head, her silver hair hiding her face, but the voices still cut into her heart. Daniel walked beside her, always steady, calm, his hand ready if trouble came. Yet even he could not silence the city's tongue. At the machine shop where he worked, the whispers were louder. "Why waste money on a beast?" one man sneered. "She will never be human." "You fool," another muttered. Daniel ignored them. But the heat in his chest burned. His hands tightened on his tools. But he did not strike Sierra waiting outside. Could feel the weight of every word thrown at him. Guilt twisted inside her, for she feared his life was being destroyed because of her. Nights were no safer. More than once, stones hit the windows of their small home. Voices shouted from the shadows, "Send her back to the pens." One evening, a group of drunken men circled the house. Pounding on the door, Sierra froze, her body shaking. Memories of chains rushing back. Daniel lit a lantern and stood firm. "Leave or you will regret it," he said. His voice cold as steel. The men laughed. But when he stepped outside, his eyes burned with something they had never seen. The laughter died and the men slipped into the night. Still, Sierra knew they would return, stronger, braver, more cruel. Inside the house, silence filled the air. Daniel sat with heavy breath, his hands shaking slightly. Sierra touched his arm, unsure, her voice soft. "Why do you protect me?" His eyes met hers. Tired but strong. "Because you are not what they say? Because you deserve more than chains." Her heart beat fast. Confused, afraid, but also stirred with something new. No one had ever spoken to her that way. No one had seen her as more than a tool. She wanted to believe him, but fear still chained her soul. In the marketplace, the danger grew. An officer in black uniform stopped them one day. His voice sharp, his eyes cruel. "The council does not like what you are doing." "Human." Daniel kept his face calm. "I broke no law," the officer smirked. "Maybe not yet, but laws can change." He leaned close to Sierra, his breath foul. "When they change, little beast, you will beg for the cages again." Sierra flinched back, but Daniel stepped between them, his body a shield. The officer laughed and walked away, leaving only fear behind. At night, Sierra could not sleep. She watched Daniel by the window, his shoulders heavy, his eyes on the stars. She whispered, "Why do you not let me go?" "I bring only trouble." He turned, his face hard. "Because letting you go would be worse than chains, worse than death. They would break you, and I will not allow it." The fire in his voice shook her. She lay back, her heart confused, but she felt something stronger than fear now. She felt the start of trust. Days passed, and the whispers grew louder. Some humans spoke of Daniel as a traitor. Some aliens whispered too, wondering if Sierra had betrayed her own kind. They said no human would ever truly care. They said she was blind, her chest ached. Torn between two worlds, but when she looked at Daniel, she saw no lie in his eyes, only a man who carried pain too heavy for one life. One evening she found courage. She asked him, "Why did you buy me, truly? What do you want from me?" For a moment he said nothing, only silence. Then he answered, his voice low, "I wanted to save at least one life, because I could not save the others." She did not understand fully, but she saw the shadow in his eyes. It was the shadow of war, of blood, of memories he carried like chains. Her heart softened, her anger melted a little. Perhaps he was not only her rescuer, perhaps he was also broken. Two broken souls bound by fate, but danger did not rest. The men who had circled the house before returned. This time with knives, they whispered in the dark, their boots scratching against the stones. Sierra's ears caught the sound and fear gripped her. She shook Daniel awake, and he rose with calm, his hand gripping the old weapon hidden under the floor. Through the window he saw their shadows, waiting, circling like wolves. This was no longer whispers, no longer rumor. This was the beginning of war. Sierra clutched his arm, her voice trembling. "They will kill us." Daniel looked at her, his eyes like fire. "Then let them try." And for the first time, she believed he would fight not only for himself, but for her. And deep inside, she felt a flame she thought had died forever. A flame of courage, a flame of belonging. The night was silent, but Daniel did not sleep. Sierra lay in her bed, her breathing soft, yet her mind restless with fear. Outside, the memory of footsteps and knives still haunted her ears. But inside the house, a different storm was brewing. Daniel sat alone by the window, staring into the black sky. The stars above seemed to call him, pulling his thoughts back to places he wanted to forget. He remembered the war, the endless fire across the galaxy, the screams of both human and alien alike. He had once worn the black uniform with pride. He had once carried the flag of conquest, believing the words of his commanders. Aliens are nothing. They are weak, they are animals. Break them and rule, they had told him. And he had obeyed, young, loyal, blind. His hands had pulled the trigger. His boots had marched through ruined villages. He had seen mothers cry, children beg, and soldiers laugh. Those memories carved deep wounds in his soul. No drink, no sleep, no prayer had ever erased them. One night, long ago, he had been ordered to burn a settlement. It was small, hidden in the hills, home to a people who never raised a weapon. He had stood with his unit, fire ready, but when the flames began, he heard a sound. It was not war, not anger, but a song. The villagers sang together as their homes burned. Their voices strong, their eyes proud. Daniel had frozen. The torch falling from his hand, he could not move. He could not destroy. In that moment, he knew everything was wrong. He knew the war was not about strength, but about cruelty, and he could not bear it any longer. He deserted that night, leaving the uniform behind. He wandered from world to world, carrying guilt like a chain. Some called him coward, others called him traitor. But he cared little for names, for the only voice that mattered was inside his head. It whispered of fire, of screams, of faces he could never save. Years passed, and he lived in silence, fixing machines, trading goods, never staying long, never making bonds until the day he walked into the market, until the day he saw Sira behind the bars, her eyes wide with the same fear he had once seen in those burning villages, and in her eyes he saw the past, the same cruelty repeated again. He could not walk away, not again, so he placed the highest bid, and for the first time in years, he felt a spark of purpose. Sira knew none of this, but she sensed the weight he carried. Sometimes she caught him staring at the stars, his face empty, his hand trembling slightly. She wanted to ask, but fear held her tongue until one night, when the silence between them grew too heavy, she whispered, "You have seen much, haven't you?" Daniel turned, his eyes sharp, then softened. "Yes," he said simply, his voice heavy. "Too much." She waited, and slowly, like a door creaking open, he told her pieces of his past, not all, not the darkest, but enough to show her the scars he carried were not on his skin. But deep inside, Sira listened in silence, her heart torn. She should hate him, for he had been part of the army that destroyed her people. Yet he was also the man who had pulled her from the cage, the man who had called her wife. Not slave, her soul battled within, torn between pain and hope. When he finished, he sat back, his eyes on the floor. "You see now why I protect you," he said, his voice low. "Because I failed too many before." Sira's chest ached. She wanted to scream at him, to curse him for the blood of her people. But she also wanted to reach out, to hold him, for he was broken like her. And in that brokenness they were alike outside. The whispers in the city grew stronger. Officials spoke quietly of punishment. Neighbors muttered of betrayal. Enemies waited in the dark, knives ready. Daniel knew the storm was coming, and Sira now understood why he faced it without fear. He was not only protecting her, he was fighting his own past. One evening, when the stars burned bright, Sira stood beside him at the window, her voice steady though her heart trembled. "You cannot carry it alone," she said. Daniel looked at her, his eyes tired, but in them was a flicker of something new. "Then carry it with me," he replied. And for the first time since the war, Daniel felt less alone. For the first time since the cages, Sira felt less afraid, but shadows moved in the streets. Whispers turned into plans. The enemies of the past were stirring, and soon, both Daniel's history and Sira's fate would collide in fire once more. The days after Daniel's confession were quiet, yet heavy. Sira carried his words in her heart, turning them again and again. He had been part of the war, part of the pain her people suffered, and yet he had also been the one to stand against it. To walk away, her mind was torn, but her heart began to shift. She no longer saw him only as the man who bought her, but as the man who had chosen differently. Each morning she rose earlier, helping him prepare tools for his shop. She swept the floor, washed the dishes, learned the rhythm of his home. Daniel never asked this of her, but she wanted to do it not as a slave, but as someone who belonged. And when he noticed, he said nothing, only gave a small nod of respect for Daniel. Every gesture from her was a sign that the chains were breaking. Slowly, Sira began to learn the human tongue. Her voice stumbled, her words simple. But Daniel was patient, he corrected gently, never mocking. Never rushing, in return, she taught him words from her people's language. Strange sounds, soft and melodic, which made him smile, though he could never shape them perfectly. Through these lessons, laughter entered the house for the first time. It was awkward, uncertain, but it was real, and every laugh chased away a little of the darkness that clung to them both. But outside, the world was not laughing. The authorities sent Daniel a warning, written on thin metal sheet. "Alien relations are under review, be advised," it said. The message was cold, empty of compassion. Sierra's hands shook when she read it, though Daniel burned it in the fire. "They will not decide who we are," he said, his voice sharp, but deep in his eyes she saw the worry. He knew laws could change overnight. He knew they could both be taken. The whispers in the streets grew sharper. Men at the tavern spoke of breaking into Daniel's home. Some wanted to teach the alien her place. Others wanted to drag Daniel before the council. Sierra felt the danger pressing in step by step. But instead of running, she made a choice. She would no longer be the silent, trembling creature from the cage. If danger came, she would face it beside him. Her chance came one night. Daniel was walking home from his shop when shadows leapt from the alleys. 3 men, faces hidden, blades in their hands, they struck fast. But Daniel fought with old soldier's skill. He blocked, dodged, landed blows, yet they were many, and he was one. Blood ran from his arm. His breath came sharp. Sierra saw it from the window, and fear clawed at her heart. But instead of hiding, she ran outside. Her hands grabbed a heavy tool, and with all her strength she struck one attacker down. The man cried out, falling to the ground. The others cursed and fled, leaving Daniel bleeding but alive. For a moment, silence ruled. Sierra's chest heaved, her hands shaking. But her eyes were fierce. Daniel looked at her with shock, then pride. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice hoarse. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. "I will not watch you fall. Not after all you did for me." In that moment, the bond between them grew stronger than fear. They were no longer protector and protected. They were partners that night as Daniel's wound was wrapped. Sierra sat close, her hands were gentle, her eyes full of fire. "Never call me weak again," she said, half smiling. Daniel chuckled softly, the first true laugh she had ever heard from him. "I never thought you were weak," he answered, "only waiting to remember your strength." Her heart swelled. Her spirit lifted. For the first time since she was taken from her people, she felt powerful again, but the danger did not end. The men who attacked would not stay silent. Their pride was wounded, and their hatred burned deeper. The council, too, had heard of the fight. To them, it was proof Daniel and Sierra were breaking order. Whispers of trial spread, whispers of punishment, and far away. In the military barracks, Daniel's old unit heard rumors. They called him deserter, traitor, alien lover, and some vowed to hunt him down, yet inside the small house, change bloomed. Sierra no longer sat apart, she no longer flinched at every sound. She walked with Daniel in the markets, her head higher, her steps steady. When insults came, she no longer bowed. When whispers followed, she no longer shrank, and beside her, Daniel walked with pride, as if the entire galaxy could not move him. The bond between them was still fragile, still new, but it was real. And it grew with each danger they faced together. And the more it grew, the more dangerous it became. For love between human and alien was not only forbidden, it was a spark that could set the galaxy aflame. That night, as they sat by the fire, Sierra looked at him, her eyes bright. "You gave me back my strength," she said. Daniel met her gaze, his voice steady. "And you gave me back my soul." They said no more, but the silence between them was full, not empty. Outside, the world plotted their downfall, but inside, 2 broken lives had found something worth fighting for. And when the storm came, they would face it together. The quiet days did not last. Word spread beyond the city. Carried by traders and soldiers, a human deserter was living with an alien woman, calling her wife. The story reached ears that should never have heard it. Daniel's old unit, men forged in war, men who had once called him brother, now called him traitor. They remembered the night he vanished, the night he abandoned their mission. To them, he was not only a deserter, but a shame on their honor. And shame demanded blood one gray morning. Soldiers entered the city, their uniforms black, their boots heavy, their eyes hard. They carried the mark of the war unit Daniel once served. People stepped aside, whispering, pointing, eager to watch the coming storm. The soldiers asked no questions, for they already knew where to go. They marched toward the small house at the edge of the district. Sierra felt the air change before she saw them. Her body stiffened, her heart beating fast. Through the window she saw the black uniforms. The symbols she hated, she whispered to Daniel. They are here. Daniel's face hardened. His jaw tight, he had known this day would come. But knowing did not make it easier. He took his old weapon from the hidden floorboard, his hand steady, though his soul was heavy. The knock on the door was not gentle. It shook the walls, sharp and commanding. "Daniel Hale," a voice roared. "Open in the name of the council and the unit you betrayed." Sierra gripped his arm, her eyes wide. "If you open, they will take you." "They will take me." Daniel looked at her, his voice calm but fierce. "Then we will not let them." He opened the door, not in surrender but in defiance. 4 soldiers stood outside, their leader tall, scarred, eyes like stone. "Brother," the leader said, his tone dripping with cold mockery. "You look older." Softer. Daniel's voice was steady. "I am no brother of yours." The man's eyes shifted to Sierra, standing behind Daniel. "So it is true," he sneered. "You abandoned us for this animal." Sierra's hands clenched, her chest burning with rage, but Daniel stood firm. "She is my wife. Speak her name with respect." The words struck the soldiers like a challenge. The leader laughed, cruel and sharp. "You have a choice, Daniel. Come with us, face judgment. And we will spare the creature or refuse, and both of you will hang as an example." Silence filled the air. Sierra's heart froze, for she feared what Daniel would choose. But his answer came fast, without hesitation. "I will not leave her, and I will not bow to murderers." The soldiers moved. Hands reaching for weapons, Daniel slammed the door shut and bolted it. "Run," he told Sierra, but she shook her head. "No, I will fight with you," she said, her voice fierce. The pounding on the door grew louder. The wood cracked, the hinges groaned. Shadows of soldiers moved outside the windows. The war had returned, and it was no longer whispers but thunder. Daniel's mind raced, every sound dragging him back to battlefields of fire. But this time he was not fighting for orders, not fighting for flags, he was fighting for her. Sierra grabbed a blade from the kitchen, her hands trembling but her eyes steady. She had been a victim too long, and she would not be one again. The door burst open, wood splintering. Soldiers poured inside, shouting, weapons raised. Daniel fired once, the sound thunderous. One soldier fell, the others surged forward. Sierra swung her blade, striking one across the arm. He cursed and staggered back, blood spilling. For a moment the house was chaos, the air filled with smoke, shouts, and fear. But the soldiers were trained. Many against 2. They pressed harder, driving Daniel and Sierra back. The leader stepped through the smoke, his scarred face cruel. "See," he shouted. "This is what happens when you betray your own." Daniel stood before Sierra, blood on his face, his breath sharp. "You are the traitors," he growled. "You betrayed humanity itself when you chose cruelty over honor," the leader sneered, raising his weapon. But before he could strike, the sound of whistles cut through the chaos. Neighbors had gathered, drawn by the fight. Some shouted, some threw stones at the soldiers. The city was not defending Daniel, not truly. But they hated soldiers more than they hated him. The distraction was enough. Daniel pulled Sierra through the back door, fleeing into the night. They ran through alleys, hearts pounding. Behind them the soldiers shouted, their boots echoing. Sierra's lungs burned, her legs weak, but Daniel pulled her onward. At last they reached the hills outside the city. Hidden in the shadows of stone, they collapsed together. Breathless, alive, but hunted, Sierra looked at him, her voice shaking. "We cannot go back," Daniel nodded, his eyes grim. "No, we cannot." The war had returned, and now they were not only husband and wife, they were fugitives. Hunted by soldiers, marked by the council, and trapped between 2 worlds. But as Sierra gripped his hand, her eyes fierce despite the fear, Daniel knew one truth. He would never give her up, not to the soldiers, not to the council, not to anyone. And if war came again, he would face it, not as a soldier of conquest, but as a man who had finally chosen his own side. The hills gave them shelter for only a short time. The soldiers searched the city, then the outskirts, their torches burning through the night. Daniel and Sierra hid in caves, living on scraps, their hearts heavy but unbroken. They knew they could not run forever. The council would not stop, the soldiers would not forgive, and whispers of their love had already grown into wildfire, spreading from city to city, world to world, dawn. As the mist still lay thick on the hills, the soldiers found them, armed and merciless. They surrounded the cave, there was no chance to fight. No place to run, Daniel stood tall, his weapon raised, ready to die beside Sira. But she touched his arm, her voice steady though her body shook. "No more hiding," she said. "If they want to judge us, let the whole world see it." Daniel looked at her, and in her eyes he saw courage, the same courage he had once lost in war. Slowly he lowered his weapon. "We will face them together," he whispered. They were taken in chains, dragged through the city streets. Crowds gathered, shouting, jeering. Some curious, some furious. "Traitor," they called Daniel. "Beast," they spat at Sira. Yet among the voices there were others, softer, questioning. "Why does he protect her?" someone asked. "Why does she stay with him if she is only property?" Another wondered. The questions spread like sparks, and sparks could become fire. The council chamber was vast, built of cold stone and iron. High seats loomed above, filled with officials in dark robes. Soldiers lined the walls, their eyes sharp, their hands on weapons. Daniel and Sira stood before them, chained but unbowed. The leader of the council spoke, his voice heavy with authority. "Daniel Hale, you stand accused of desertion, of betraying your people, of breaking law by calling this alien your wife." Murmurs filled the chamber, a sea of anger and excitement. The judge's eyes turned to Sira. "And you, creature, you are accused of corrupting a human, of deceiving him, of pretending to be equal." Sira's body shook, but Daniel stepped forward, his chains clanging. "No," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "She deceived no one. It was I who chose. I who saw her not as property, but as a person." The chamber erupted, some shouting curses, others falling silent in shock. Daniel's voice grew louder, stronger. "I fought your war. I saw your cruelty. I burned villages for your pride, and I left when I could not bear the lies." He pointed toward Sira, his eyes blazing. "She is no beast. She is braver than all of you. She saved my life when your soldiers tried to kill me. She gave me back my honor when you stole it." The council leader slammed his staff, demanding silence. "You broke law," he said, "and law must be upheld. Your bond is forbidden. Your defiance dangerous." But then Sira stepped forward, chains rattling, her voice rising clear. "You call me animal, but animals do not speak. Animals do not choose. Animals do not love." Her words echoed in the chamber, sharp as fire. "I was taken, sold, humiliated. Yet I am still here, still standing. And he is the only one who saw me as more, if that is crime. Then your law is chains for every soul in this room." The chamber grew restless. Some officials shifted uncomfortably. Some soldiers lowered their eyes, and in the crowd whispers began to change. "What if she is right?" one voice murmured. "What if they are proof that things can be different?" another said. The council leader saw it, the tide turning. Fear flickered in his eyes, for he knew power was not only in law, but in people. If the crowd believed in them, punishment would make martyrs, and martyrs were more dangerous than rebels. At last the leader's voice rose again. "Very well," he said. "You will not be executed, but you are exiled. Leave this city, leave this world, and never return." The crowd roared, some angry, some relieved. Daniel and Sira were unchained, pushed toward the gates. They were bruised, bloodied, but alive, and though the sentence was harsh, it was also a strange kind of victory. As they walked into the sunlight, Sira gripped Daniel's hand. Tears burned in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of release. They were free, not safe, but free. Behind them, the city murmured. Divided, uncertain, some still cursed, but others watched in silence, their hearts stirred by what they had seen. On the edge of the hills, Daniel stopped and looked back. "This is not the end," he said softly. Sira nodded, her voice steady. "No, it is the beginning." Together they walked forward, their steps heavy but unbroken. Two figures against the endless sky, two lives bound not by chains, but by choice. Their love was fragile, dangerous, forbidden, but it was also a spark. And sparks, when carried by the wind, can set entire worlds on fire. For the galaxy would remember that one human did not choose cruelty but compassion, that one human chose to see beyond chains, and in that choice humanity proved its worth.